The Mafia boss left roses on her grave every week, not knowing she was actually alive. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It had been 3 years. 3 years since that cold, rainy night when her car had crashed into the concrete barriers, the twisted wreckage leaving her body lifeless. The authorities had pronounced her dead on the spot. No one had ever questioned it. No one ever looked further. And for a long time, neither did he. The Mafia boss, a man whose name whispered through the underworld like a storm, had lost his world that night. She was the love of his life, and in his eyes, losing her meant losing everything. But every week, without fail, he visited her grave. He had the roses delivered, their crimson petals a symbol of the love he believed was forever buried with her. He couldn't bear to see the world move on, couldn't accept the void left by her death. Every Friday, he stood at the cold gravestone, his face marked by the weight of loss, as he placed the flowers on the mound of earth that hid the woman he had promised to protect for the rest of his life. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that she wasn't dead. She wasn't gone. She was alive. And for 3 years, she had been trying to piece together the fragments of her life that had been shattered that night. She woke up in a hospital, the sterile walls of the room suffocating her. But the worst part was the memory gap. She couldn't remember the crash, couldn't remember the life she once had. What she did remember, however, was the man she had loved, him, the Mafia boss. She remembered his touch, his voice, his warmth. But there was something about it all that felt wrong. She didn't remember enough to understand what had happened. She didn't even remember why she had disappeared from his life in the first place. She spent months recovering, learning to navigate her new life, and struggling with the fact that her past was lost to her. Every day, she felt the weight of the unknown pushing down on her, suffocating her sense of self. But it wasn't until she saw him again that everything started to fall into place. It was accidental, as most things in her new life were. She had just started a new job, working at a small cafe in the city. Nothing special. It was meant to be a way to keep her busy, keep her mind from drifting back to the nightmare of what she had lost. And then, one day he walked in. The same man who had once been everything to her. He didn't recognize her at first. She saw the flicker of curiosity in his eyes as he watched her serve drinks, as if there was something familiar about her. He didn't know why, but he couldn't shake the feeling. And when their eyes met, when she served him his coffee, something changed. For a brief moment, their worlds collided, and he felt it. A sudden rush of emotions he had long buried deep within him. He had been to her grave every week, unable to move forward, unable to let go. But now, standing before him, was a woman who seemed to be the echo of the one he had lost. She looked so much like her, but something was off. Was it possible? Could she be alive? His heart raced, the questions swirling in his mind. But for her, the flood of emotions was even stronger. Seeing him again was like being thrust back into a storm she was never prepared to face. She had spent so long trying to forget him, to forget the pain, but now, standing so close, all the memories rushed back. The love, the betrayal, the danger. It was all there. And the most terrifying part? She wasn't sure if she was ready to face it again. But she couldn't stop herself from looking at him, from feeling the pull. She had to know. Was he the man she once loved, or was he someone she should fear? It had been weeks since their unexpected encounter at the cafe, and the more she tried to push him out of her mind, the more he seemed to haunt her. Every thought, every time she closed her eyes, she could see his piercing dark eyes, the way they held so many questions, so much pain, the same eyes that had once looked at her with love. But things were different now. He was no longer the man she remembered. He wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. He was a stranger wearing the same face, the same clothes. But his heart was a different story. She tried to convince herself that she was imagining things. He couldn't possibly recognize her, not after all this time. But every time he visited, she could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the way his gaze lingered just a little too long, as if he was trying to figure out who she really was. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something dangerous, something she wasn't ready to face. But she also couldn't ignore the pull between them, the magnetic connection that seemed to bind them, even though she had no memory of the years they had spent together. It wasn't until one late evening that the truth finally came crashing down on her. It was closing time at the cafe, and the streets outside were quiet, the usual hustle and bustle of the city replaced by a strange calm. She was just finishing wiping down the counter when she heard the door chime. She turned around, expecting to see another late-night customer in need of a coffee, but instead, her heart stopped. There he was again, standing in the doorway, his tall figure framed by the light from outside. This time, his presence felt different. It wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just the strange pull she felt whenever he was near. This time, it felt like something more. Something she wasn't ready for. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither of them moved. She felt the tension building between them, the air thick with unspoken words. He stepped inside, the sound of his polished shoes echoing in the empty cafe. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice steady. But there was a hint of urgency that made her heart race. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. What could she possibly say to him? What could she say to the man who had once been the love of her life, the man who had thought she was dead for the last 3 years? "Please," he continued, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I know something is wrong. I've been watching you, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we keep running into each other." Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at him. The truth was right there, hanging in the air between them, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. "You were supposed to be dead," he whispered, as if finally admitting the truth to himself. "I've been visiting your grave every week. I've been living with the guilt, thinking that I lost you. I couldn't move on, and I couldn't understand why." The words hit her like a wave. She had known, of course. She had known that he believed she was dead. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing the pain in his voice, made everything so much more real. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, taking a step closer, his eyes searching hers for answers. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. She couldn't explain why she had stayed away, why she had kept him in the dark. There were too many reasons, too many unanswered questions. But the truth was, she was terrified. Terrified of what would happen if he knew who she really was. Terrified of what would happen if she let him back into her life. "You don't remember, do you?" he asked softly, his gaze softening for the first time since he had walked in. "You don't remember what happened between us?" She shook her head, the confusion and the fear written all over her face. She wanted to remember. She wanted to know what had happened, why everything had fallen apart, why she had disappeared. But she couldn't. Her past felt like a distant dream, a life she had lived but no longer recognized. "I can help you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "We can figure this out together. I won't stop until I get you back. I won't let you slip away again." She felt her heart race, a mixture of fear and longing flooding her chest. She didn't know what to do, what to say. She didn't know if she could trust him, but a part of her wanted to. Part of her wanted to believe that there was still a chance for them. But at what cost? "I'm not the same person you remember," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can go back to that life. I don't know if I can be with you again." His eyes darkened, a flicker of something dangerous passing through them. "You're not the one who gets to decide that," he said quietly, his tone hardening. "We're not finished. And I'll make sure you remember that." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, she realized just how deep she had fallen into his world. The world she had once left behind. The world she had tried to forget. The silence that followed his words hung heavy in the air, like the weight of a secret too painful to bear. She stood there, frozen, as his gaze never left hers. It wasn't the same look he had given her when she was just the woman he loved. This was something else, something colder, darker. It was as if he was seeing her for the first time in years, but at the same time, he had never truly let go. "You're not the person I thought you were," he said, his voice steady. But there was a crack in it now, a tinge of vulnerability she had never heard before. She wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to explain why she had disappeared, why she had stayed away for so long. But the words stuck in her throat. How could she explain something she didn't fully understand herself? She didn't remember enough. Not the crash, not the betrayal, and not the events that had driven her away from him. The only thing she knew was the overwhelming, suffocating guilt that had consumed her life ever since she had regained consciousness. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, and for a moment, she felt a pang of fear. He had always been intimidating, but this time, there was something different about him. He wasn't the man she remembered, the one who had made her feel safe, loved, cherished. Now, he was a man who held power in every part of him, a man who could destroy everything in his path without blinking. "Tell me what happened," he demanded, his voice low, as though he was speaking to someone who owed him answers. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. She could feel the walls around her heart begin to crack, but she was terrified of what would happen if she let him in again. "I don't remember," she whispered. "I wish I did. But I don't." His eyes softened for a brief moment, but only for a second. He stepped back, looking at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You think I'll just let you walk away again?" he asked, almost as if he was trying to convince himself. She didn't know how to answer that. Would he let her go? Or had he already decided that she belonged to him, no matter what? "I don't know what you want from me," she said, her voice shaking. "I've spent the last few years trying to forget who I was. And now you're here. And I don't know what to do." "What you need to do," he said, his tone firm, "is remember. You need to remember us." Her heart beat faster, a mix of fear and something she couldn't quite name. He had always been persuasive, always knew how to manipulate the situation to his advantage. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't just about the power he wielded over her. It was about something deeper, something she couldn't ignore. "I can't," she said, shaking her head. "I can't remember a life that I don't even know if I want back." His expression darkened. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with tension. "You don't get to make that choice," he said, his voice low, almost threatening. "I made that choice for you the moment you stepped back into my world." His words sent a chill down her spine. He was right. She had stepped back into his world. There was no escaping it now. "I'm not the same person anymore," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Neither am I," he replied, his voice sharp. "But that doesn't mean we don't still have something to fix." She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on her. Could she fix it? Could she ever go back to the way things were? Or was that part of her life lost forever? She opened her eyes and met his gaze once again. The years that had passed between them hung heavily in the air, but she could still see the same man she had loved in his eyes, the same passion, the same need to claim her. But could she allow him to claim her again? Could she trust him, after everything that had happened? "You're not leaving," he said, more like a command than a question. "Not this time." She didn't answer him right away. The silence between them stretched, heavy and unbearable. What was left to say? What was left to do? The man she had once loved had become a stranger, and she was no longer sure if she could ever find her way back to him. But there was one thing she was sure of. The past was never truly gone. It was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And she could feel that moment coming closer. The silence between them stretched for what felt like an eternity. She could feel his eyes on her, burning through the fragile mask she had put up over the years. The walls she had built to protect herself from him, from the pain of her past, were starting to crumble. And with every passing second, she knew there was no escaping him. He wasn't going to let her leave this time. He hadn't come all this way just to let her walk away again. Her heart raced in her chest, and despite everything, despite the years of fear and hurt, she couldn't deny the pull she still felt toward him. "I don't know how to go back," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You don't have to go back," he replied, stepping closer, his voice low and commanding. "We can go forward, together. But you need to remember everything." His words stung, but she couldn't ignore them. How could she move forward with him when she couldn't even remember the past they had shared? The past that had destroyed them both. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the images of him, of their time together. The love they had shared, the dreams they had built, all of it felt so far away now. "What if I can't remember?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if there's nothing left for us?" "You don't get to decide that," he said firmly, his voice hardening. "I decide when we're finished. And we're not finished." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. The man who had once been her whole world now seemed like a stranger, his eyes filled with anger and determination. He wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. He was something darker now, but a part of her still saw him. The man who had held her close, who had promised to protect her. The man who had once been everything. "I can't do this," she whispered, stepping back. "I can't go back to that life." His expression hardened. You're not going back to that life. You're coming back to me. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had always known that he wouldn't let her go easily. He had always been possessive, always controlled everything in his world. But this felt different. This felt dangerous. You think I'm going to let you walk away again? After all this time, he said, his voice low and menacing. You're mine. You've always been mine. The words hit her like a punch in the gut. She had heard them before, but now they sounded like a threat, not a promise. You don't own me, she said, her voice shaking with the effort of holding back the fear that was starting to rise inside her. I'm not yours anymore. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, his eyes never leaving hers. You don't get to make that choice. You're mine, and you always will be. The anger in his voice was palpable, and it sent a shiver down her spine. She had always known he was dangerous, but this was something else entirely. He wasn't just a man in control of his empire. He was a man who had lost everything, and he wasn't going to let her slip away again. You don't understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't be with you. Not after everything that's happened. Not after what I've seen. His gaze softened for a moment, but only for a second. What you've seen? He asked, his voice quieting. What do you mean? She hesitated, trying to find the words to explain the fear, the confusion that had taken over her life. I don't remember everything, but I know enough. Enough to know that I can't trust you, that I can't trust this world anymore. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, she thought he might back away. But instead, he reached out, his hand brushing against her cheek. His touch was gentle, but it sent a wave of emotions crashing through her. She wanted to pull away, but she couldn't. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him to leave her alone, but something kept her rooted to the spot. I don't want you to remember, he said softly. I don't need you to remember. I just need you to come back to me. To us. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had tried to move on, to forget everything that had happened, but every step she took away from him felt like a lie. The truth was, she hadn't moved on. Not really. She had just been hiding. Hiding from him. Hiding from the past. Hiding from the pain. And now, standing here, with him in front of her again, she realized that there was no escaping it. No escaping him. She opened her eyes and met his gaze once again. There was no turning back now. You're not leaving, he said, his voice resolute. Not again. Not this time. The words rang in her ears, and for the first time in years, she realized that she was trapped. Trapped in a world that was both terrifying and familiar. A world she couldn't escape from, no matter how hard she tried. And as much as she wanted to run, to escape, a part of her knew that it was already too late. The tension in the air was thick, and as he stood there, staring at her with a gaze that pierced right through her, she could feel her resolve beginning to falter. She had tried so hard to bury the past, to erase the man standing before her from her life. But now, as he spoke to her, every word felt like a dagger being driven into her chest, reminding her of everything she had tried to forget. You can't just walk away, not now, he said, his voice cold and unyielding. You think you can escape me again? You think I'll let you go, after everything that's happened? She wanted to scream at him, tell him to leave her alone, that she didn't owe him anything, that he had no right to control her life. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stood there, frozen in place, the weight of his words crushing her. I'm not the same person I was before, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't remember who I was, who we were. I don't know if I can ever go back to that life. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, his eyes never leaving hers. You don't need to remember, he said softly, his hand reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. You don't need to go back to that life. All you need to do is come back to me. That's all that matters. The gentleness in his touch only made her more confused. How could he be so calm, so sure of himself, when everything had been destroyed? You can't just erase everything, she said, shaking her head. You can't erase the pain, the betrayal. His expression hardened. I didn't betray you, he said, his voice suddenly low and dangerous. I did what I had to do. You think it was easy for me? You think I wanted to lose you? Her heart raced as he spoke, his words stirring emotions she thought she had buried long ago. But the truth was, she wasn't sure anymore. She wasn't sure if she could keep running from him, from the life they once had. I didn't choose this, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. I didn't choose to disappear, to leave you behind. But I had to. You don't understand. Then make me understand, he demanded. Tell me. Tell me what happened. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to explain everything. To make him understand the fear that had driven her to leave. The danger that had been lurking in the shadows, waiting to destroy everything they had built. But she couldn't. The memories were too painful, too fragmented. And she wasn't sure she could trust him again, wasn't sure if she could trust herself. I can't remember everything, she said, tears welling in her eyes. But I know enough to know that I can't go back to that life. It's too dangerous. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, wiping away the tear that had escaped. I don't care about the danger, he said, his voice softening. I care about you. I'll protect you, no matter what. You don't have to face this alone. Her heart ached as she looked into his eyes, seeing the man she had once loved, the man who had promised to protect her, the man who had broken her heart. But you can't protect me from everything, she whispered. You can't protect me from myself. He shook his head, taking a step back. You're wrong, he said firmly. You don't have to face anything alone. Not anymore. His words hung in the air between them, heavy and charged with the promise of something neither of them could escape. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could start over, that they could rebuild what had been lost. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. The past was always going to be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to destroy everything again. She had tried so hard to bury it, to move on, but now, with him standing in front of her, it was all coming back. And she wasn't sure she was strong enough to face it. I can't do this, she said, her voice breaking. I can't go back to that world. I can't be with you again. His expression darkened, and for a moment, she saw the cold, ruthless man he had become. You don't get to make that choice, he said, his voice hard. I made that choice for you the moment you stepped back into my world. And you're not leaving. Not this time. The words hit her like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, she felt a rush of panic flood through her. There was no escaping him. There was no escaping the life he had drawn her back into. But even as she felt the fear rising inside her, there was a part of her that couldn't help but feel the pull, the connection that still lingered between them. He wasn't just the Mafia boss. He was the man she had once loved. And no matter how much she tried to fight it, she couldn't deny that a part of her still wanted to be with him. But at what cost? Could she really go back to that life? Could she survive it a second time? It was the weight of his words that haunted her long after the conversation ended. She had been in his presence for what felt like a lifetime, and yet, in that moment, everything had changed. She could feel herself being pulled back into his world, that dangerous, powerful world she had tried to escape, the world that had once consumed her, but now felt like a prison. A part of her wanted to run. A part of her wanted to fight. But deep down, she knew there was no running from him, not anymore. She had made her choice when she stepped into his life again, when she had let the past resurface. The question now was, what was she going to do with it? He wasn't the man she had once known. The man she had loved was gone, replaced by a man who was consumed by power and control, a man who was determined to get what he wanted, no matter the cost. And what he wanted now was her. She could see it in his eyes, the unyielding determination that had always been a part of him. She had seen that look before, when he had promised to protect her, to keep her safe. But now, she wasn't sure if that promise meant anything. You can't run away from this, he had said. And maybe he was right. Maybe she couldn't. She had tried to walk away from him once before, and now she was standing at the edge of his world once again. The difference was, she wasn't sure if she could ever leave again. Days passed, and she found herself back at his estate, the walls she had so carefully built around her crumbling with every interaction. The old feelings began to resurface, the warmth of his touch, the memories of their time together, of the man she had loved. But there was a coldness to him now, a hardness in his eyes that made her hesitate. He wasn't the same man, and neither was she. She had to remind herself of that. Every time he reached out to her, every time he looked at her like she was still his. She wasn't his. She was her own person, and yet, every time she looked at him, she felt the pull. It was like an invisible thread that tied them together, a bond that couldn't be broken, no matter how hard she tried to cut it. But the reality was, she didn't want to cut it. She didn't know if she could. One night, after dinner, when the house had settled into a strange stillness, he found her standing on the balcony, staring out at the city lights below. The night was cool, the air thick with tension, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. She could feel his presence behind her, the familiar weight of his gaze on her back. "You're thinking about leaving again, aren't you?" he said softly, breaking the silence. She didn't turn to face him, but his words struck a chord deep inside her. It was as if he had read her thoughts, as if he knew the battle that raged within her. "I'm not leaving," she replied quietly, her voice steady, but the truth of it hurt more than she wanted to admit. "Then what is it?" he asked, stepping closer. She could feel him behind her, the warmth of his body just inches from hers. "Why do you keep pushing me away?" She shook her head. "I'm not pushing you away," she said, her voice a little shakier now. "I just don't know who I am anymore." He was silent for a moment, and she could feel the weight of his gaze on her, searching for something in her expression. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. "You're still the same person," he said after a long pause. "You're just afraid of what's happened, what you've become." The words stung more than she expected. "I'm not afraid," she said, her voice hardening. "I'm just confused. I don't know what to believe anymore." "Believe me," he said, his tone soft but firm. "I'm not the enemy here. I never was." She turned slowly, finally meeting his gaze. There was something in his eyes, a softness that hadn't been there before, something vulnerable. For a moment, it felt like the man she had once known was standing before her, not the cold, calculating figure he had become. "You're not the enemy?" she asked, the words almost bitter on her tongue. "Then why does it feel like you own me? Why does it feel like I have no choice?" His expression hardened again, and the distance between them seemed to widen. "You always had a choice," he said, his voice low and controlled. "But you chose to be with me. You chose to come back." She could feel the sting of his words, the truth that lay within them. She had chosen him. She had come back to him, knowing the consequences, knowing the danger. And now, there was no turning back. "I didn't know what I was coming back to," she whispered, her eyes searching his face. "I didn't know what this would cost me." He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "It's not about the cost. It's about us. We can't undo what's been done, but we can move forward. Together." She shook her head slowly, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "I don't know if I can," she said softly. He reached out, his hand brushing her cheek. "You don't have to know right now," he said, "but I won't let you go again." And for the first time in years, she felt the terrifying truth of his promise. He was never going to let her go. The days that followed their confrontation were filled with a strange, suffocating silence. She had tried to push him away, to build the walls between them higher, but somehow, they only seemed to crumble faster. Every glance, every word between them seemed to pull her deeper into his world, the world she had once left behind. But now, it felt like she could never escape. She had once promised herself she would never return to him, but now, standing in his presence again, she was beginning to question everything. She was beginning to question who she had become. The estate felt like a prison. The mansion's opulent rooms, the grand marble halls, and the cold, dark corners where secrets lingered. Everything about this place reminded her of the life she had been forced to leave. But it was also a reminder of the power he wielded, the grip he had on her, on everything. She could feel it in the air, thick with tension, as she moved through the estate. Every room felt like it was watching her, waiting for her to make her move. He had told her she had no choice, and in some ways, it was true. He was always one step ahead, always in control, and no matter how much she tried to run, it seemed like there was nowhere left to hide. He wasn't letting her go. Not this time. It wasn't just the danger of his world that terrified her. It was the power he held over her heart. She had felt that pull from the moment they met. The connection, the love, the passion that had once consumed her. But now, that passion had become a weapon he wielded with a deadly precision. She didn't know if she was strong enough to face it again. Her thoughts were interrupted when he appeared at the door to her room, his presence as commanding as ever. He didn't need to knock. He never did. "I thought we agreed you wouldn't lock the door," he said, his voice calm, yet edged with something darker. "I don't need permission," he added, his eyes never leaving hers as he stepped into the room. She didn't say anything, didn't move. She just stood there, her back pressed against the cold wall, her eyes searching his face for any sign of the man she had once known. But he was different now. There was something about him, something colder, more dangerous, that made her question everything. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, his voice softening for the briefest moment, but she didn't trust it. "You're not afraid of me," she replied, her voice shaky but defiant. "You're afraid of what I've become." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, there was silence. She could see the flicker of something in his eyes, something that resembled guilt, but it was gone before she could fully comprehend it. He was a man who never showed weakness, never allowed himself to be vulnerable. But for a fleeting second, she thought she saw it. "You've changed," he said, his voice quiet but sharp. "I've changed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But so have you." He took a step closer to her, his eyes searching her face, looking for something, as if he could will her to remember, to come back to him. "You can't keep pushing me away," he said, his voice a little rougher now, the authority in it returning. "You belong with me. You always have." She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to block out the storm of emotions inside her. She knew it was true. He had always been the center of her world. He had always known how to make her feel like she was the only one. But that wasn't enough anymore. The man she had once loved had become something else, something darker. "I'm not the same woman you remember," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't make me be who I was." His gaze softened slightly, but the determination in his eyes never wavered. "I don't need you to be the woman you were," he said, his voice almost tender now. "I just need you to be with me. I need you back, and I'm not going to let you walk away again." She could feel the weight of his words, the gravity of his presence. He wasn't asking her to return to their past. He wasn't asking for the old her. He was asking her to trust him again, to step back into his world, to live under his protection, his control. And that was what terrified her the most. Could she trust him again? Could she return to a life that had caused her so much pain? She wanted to say no. She wanted to walk away, to escape this world once and for all. But she couldn't. She was trapped. Trapped in the past, trapped in his world, and as much as she hated it, a part of her still wanted to be there. She still wanted him. "I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can live this life again." He took another step closer, his hand reaching out to touch her cheek. His touch was gentle, but there was an intensity in it, a longing that sent a shiver down her spine. "You don't have to do it alone," he said softly, his eyes locking onto hers. "I won't let you." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for just a moment. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain, there was no escaping him. Not anymore. The weight of his touch lingered on her skin, a constant reminder of the power he held over her. She had always been able to escape his world, but now, it felt like there was no going back. Every move she made, every breath she took, seemed to pull her deeper into his life, a life that was filled with danger, deceit, and darkness. She had spent years trying to forget, trying to live a life free from the chains he had once wrapped around her. But now here she was again, standing at the edge of that life, caught between the man she had once loved and the woman she had become. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, his voice low and reassuring, but there was a hard edge to it, a warning beneath the calm exterior. "I won't hurt you." The words were meant to soothe, but they only made her heart race with fear. How could he say that? How could he promise that when his world was built on violence and fear? How could he promise her safety when he was the very reason she had run in the first place? "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady, though her heart told a different story. "I'm afraid of what I've become." He tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words, but there was no pity in his gaze, no softness. He was a man of control, of power, and he didn't have room for weakness. "You haven't changed," he said, his tone firm. "You're still the same woman I loved, the same woman who walked away from me. But I won't let you walk away again. Not after everything we've been through." She stepped back, instinctively putting distance between them. His words cut through her like a blade, and for a moment, she could feel the pull of the past, the old feelings she had buried so deeply. She had loved him once, with a fierce, consuming passion, and she could feel that same heat rising inside her. But she couldn't go back to that life. She couldn't return to a world where every decision was made for her, where every move she made was watched, controlled. "I'm not the same woman," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I'm not the woman you knew." He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She didn't move. He reached out, his hand brushing against her cheek. His touch was warm, gentle, and for a moment, she let herself lean into it. She remembered the feeling of being held by him, of being cherished. But then the memory faded, replaced by the reality of the situation. "You think I want the same things we had?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "You think I want to live in your world again?" He held her gaze, his eyes never leaving hers, and for a moment, she saw something different in them. Something soft, something vulnerable. It was fleeting, but it was there. "I don't want to drag you back into this life," he said softly, his voice low and sincere. "But you're already here. You're already a part of it. And I can't let you go." She felt the sting of his words, felt the weight of his promise pressing down on her. There was no escape. Not anymore. He had already claimed her, in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. She wasn't free. Not in the way she thought she was. "I don't belong in your world," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "You don't understand. I've changed. I've made a life for myself, away from all of this." He didn't flinch, didn't step back. Instead, he reached out and took her hand in his grip firm but not painful. "I know you've changed," he said, his voice steady. "But you belong with me. You always have. And I won't let you slip away again." Her heart thundered in her chest, her breath catching in her throat. She wanted to pull away, to break free from him, but the weight of his words held her in place. She wasn't sure if she wanted to leave or stay, if she wanted to escape or fall back into his arms. She couldn't make sense of the conflicting emotions swirling inside her. "I'm not the same person," she said again, her voice trembling with the uncertainty she couldn't hide. "I don't know if I can go back to being that person, to living in your world again." He stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "I don't need you to be the person you were," he said, his voice quiet, but filled with certainty. "I just need you to be with me, to choose me." She looked into his eyes, the intensity of his gaze washing over her, and for a moment, she felt herself falter. Could she choose him? Could she return to a life that had brought her nothing but pain and fear? But in his eyes, she saw something else, a desire, a need for her. A promise of protection, of control. And that was what scared her the most. "I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I don't know if I can walk away either." He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her toward him, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both desperate and tender, as if he was trying to reclaim what he had lost. She didn't pull away. She couldn't. The kiss was everything. The past, the present, and the uncertain future between them. And for the first time in years, she felt like she was home. The kiss lingered between them, a delicate, fleeting moment that held the weight of everything unsaid. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pulled away, her breath shaky, her thoughts a tangled mess. He was still holding her close, his presence overwhelming. But in that instant, something inside her shifted. She could feel the past creeping back in, and it terrified her. She had spent so long trying to move on, to escape the pull of his world, but now, it felt like she had never truly left. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice trembling as she looked up at him. "I don't know if I can live in your world again." His gaze softened, but there was an edge to it, something that made her feel like there was no way out. "You don't have to live in it alone," he said, his voice steady, almost pleading. "You don't have to carry the weight of it all by yourself." She pulled away slightly, stepping back as the reality of the situation set in. She could feel the walls closing in around her. The walls she had so carefully built, only to have them torn down piece by piece, just by being in his presence again. "I'm not sure if I'm ready to go back," she said, the words heavy with regret. "I'm not sure if I can trust myself, let alone you." He didn't step forward this time, didn't try to close the distance between them. Instead, he just stood there, watching her, the silence between them thick and suffocating. "You don't have to trust yourself," he said quietly. "I'll take care of everything. I'll protect you. I always have." She felt a pang in her chest. The words were familiar, comforting even, but she couldn't ignore the darker truth buried beneath them. "I don't want to be protected," she said, shaking her head. "I want to be free." He took a step toward her, but this time, she didn't move. His hand reached out, and for a moment, she thought he might touch her again, but he stopped himself. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that instant, she saw something raw in them, something that made her question everything. You don't have to be free of me, he said, his voice soft but firm. You don't have to fight me. You belong with me, and I won't let you walk away again. She felt her pulse quicken, the truth of his words sinking in. There was no walking away from him. Not now. Not ever. She had tried to escape him once before, and here she was, standing in front of him again, caught in the same web, the same dangerous game. I can't do this, she whispered again, more to herself than to him. I can't go back to being the woman I was. I can't go back to that life. His face hardened, and for a moment, she saw the man he had become, a man of power, of control, a man who wouldn't let go. You don't have to go back, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You just have to stay. Stay with me, and I'll make sure nothing hurts you. Nothing can take you away from me again. She swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. She had never been able to say no to him. He had always known how to get what he wanted, how to make her feel like she was the only thing that mattered. And deep down, she knew that was part of the reason she couldn't walk away. He made her feel wanted. He made her feel powerful. But at what cost? I don't know if I can trust you anymore, she said, her voice shaky, her thoughts clouded. I don't know if I can trust myself. He stepped closer again, his eyes searching hers, looking for something, as if he could will her to understand. You don't have to trust yourself, he said, his tone softer now, almost tender. You only have to trust me. I've never let you down before, and I won't start now. She felt his words in the pit of her stomach, a cold shiver running down her spine. She didn't know if she could believe him, if she could trust him the way she once had, but she didn't know if she had a choice anymore. I can't keep living like this, she said quietly, her voice breaking. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when I know it's not. He stopped in front of her, his hand reaching out to touch her cheek gently. You don't have to pretend, he said softly. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, but you have to face the truth. You're mine, and you always will be. The words felt like a weight around her neck, pulling her down, suffocating her. She wanted to fight him, wanted to push him away, but something in his eyes, something deep and unwavering, made her hesitate. She wasn't sure if it was love, or fear, or something else entirely. But whatever it was, it kept her rooted to the spot. What if I can't do this anymore? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I'm not the person you think I am? His gaze softened, but the determination in his eyes never wavered. You are the person I've always known you to be, he said quietly. And that's all that matters. She wanted to say something, wanted to push him away, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just stood there, looking at him, torn between the past and the present, between the woman she had been and the woman she was becoming. And in that moment, she realized something. She was already too deep into his world to ever walk away again. The following days felt like a blur. She had stepped back into his world, but the man she was facing now was different from the one she had once known. He was colder, more distant, yet his grip on her remained unshakable. It was as if he had never let go, and now, she was caught in the whirlwind of everything she had tried to escape. The estate was too big, too silent, the walls filled with secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to uncover. The staff moved around her like shadows, their eyes avoiding hers, as if they, too, knew there was no way out. She spent her days wandering through the mansion, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. Should she stay and try to reclaim some semblance of the life she had lost? Or should she leave, walk away from the man who had once meant everything to her? Each day, it felt like she was living in someone else's skin, trapped in a world that no longer made sense. He had warned her that she couldn't escape again, but the question was, did she even want to? The pull between them was undeniable. Despite everything, the lies, the danger, the betrayal, there was still something inside her that ached to be with him. That same warmth, that same fire that had once burned so brightly, was still there, flickering beneath the surface. But the more she felt it, the more the doubt crept in. She had spent so long trying to forget him, and now, as she stood in the same mansion that had once been their home, she was realizing just how deep his hold on her still was. Every time he walked into the room, she could feel his presence like a storm gathering, powerful and relentless. But it wasn't just his physical presence that unsettled her. It was the way he could read her, the way he always knew what she was thinking, even when she didn't. She couldn't hide from him. She couldn't escape him. And for the first time in years, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to. It wasn't until the evening after one of their long, silent dinners that things began to unravel. She had been sitting in the garden, trying to breathe, trying to clear her mind. The cool night air did little to calm the storm inside her. The rustling of leaves was the only sound, the only company in the stillness. That was when he appeared, walking toward her with the same confident stride she remembered so well. He didn't say anything at first. He simply sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. But she could feel him there, his presence looming over her, as if he was waiting for her to break the silence. "You're still trying to run," he said quietly, his voice low, almost like a whisper. She didn't respond right away. What could she say? The truth was, she was running, but not from him, not anymore. She was running from the woman she had become, from the life she had built in his absence. A life that had been easy to pretend was real, but was never really hers. "I'm not running," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I'm just trying to understand what this is." He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, and for a moment, she let herself feel the comfort of his touch. "This is us," he said softly, his thumb gently tracing the back of her hand. "This is where we belong. Together." She closed her eyes, the warmth of his touch mixing with the cold reality that kept gnawing at her. She had once believed in them, believed in him, in the love they shared, but now, everything was different. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that maybe it was all an illusion. "I don't know if I can be with you again," she said, her voice trembling. "Not like this. Not after everything that's happened." "Nothing has changed," he replied firmly. "You think you've changed, but you haven't. You're still the same woman I fell in love with. The one who belongs with me." She turned to face him, meeting his gaze for the first time in days. His eyes were intense, filled with something that could only be described as need, as if he was trying to pull something from her that she didn't know if she had anymore. "You're wrong," she said, shaking her head. "I'm not the same person. I can't be who you want me to be." He didn't flinch, didn't move away. Instead, he stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "I'm not asking you to be anyone else," he said softly, his breath warm against her skin. "I'm asking you to be with me. And I'll do whatever it takes to make you understand that." His words sent a shiver through her, but it wasn't fear, it was something else. It was the same feeling she had once gotten when she had been in his arms, when everything else had disappeared, and there had only been the two of them. "I can't promise you that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't promise that I'll ever be the woman you remember." He placed his hand on her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin. "I don't need you to be her," he said, his voice low and steady. "I just need you to trust me. To trust that we can make this work. Together." She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to respond. She had never been good at saying no to him, but this time, she wasn't sure if she could say yes. There was too much history, too much pain, too many broken promises. And yet, as he looked at her, as his touch held her in place, she knew that somehow, someway, she was already falling back into his world. A world she had tried so desperately to escape, but a world that, in some twisted way, still felt like home. The days that followed were heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She had made her choice, or so she thought. Yet, the more time passed, the more tangled her emotions became. The man who had once been her lover, the man she had fought so hard to escape, was now firmly in her life again, and despite her every attempt to resist, she was still tied to him. No matter how much she tried to push him away, she couldn't escape the pull of his world, a world that had become so familiar, so suffocating. She walked through the grand halls of the mansion, her footsteps echoing in the silence, the weight of his presence in every room she entered. Every part of the estate felt like a reminder of the past they shared, the love that had once consumed her, and the destruction that followed. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, caught between the desire to escape and the need to understand everything that had led her back to him. He had given her everything, power, wealth, protection, but it came with a price. His world was one of shadows, danger, and control, and for a brief moment, she had forgotten what it felt like to be her own person, free from the constraints of his world. But now, as his eyes watched her every move, as his grip tightened around her heart, She realized that freedom was something she could never have again, not with him in the picture. It was late in the evening when he found her again, standing by the window, staring out into the darkened skyline. The city lights twinkled below, but inside, the mansion felt empty, silent, like a cage she couldn't escape. She turned when she heard his footsteps, and, for the first time, she didn't flinch. "You can't keep doing this," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "You can't keep running from me." She felt a tightness in her chest, the familiar ache of being caught between two worlds. "I'm not running," she replied, her voice steady, though the words felt hollow. "I'm just trying to figure out where I belong." He stepped closer, his presence like a storm that she couldn't ignore. "You belong with me," he said firmly. "You've always belonged with me." She looked at him, her heart heavy with conflict. Could she really go back to this life? To the man who had broken her once before? Could she trust him again, after everything that had happened? His gaze never wavered, and she could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. He wasn't asking her to forget the past. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was demanding her presence, her loyalty, her submission. "I don't want to be part of your world anymore," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't live like this." He stopped in front of her, his gaze intense. "You're already part of it. You always were. And you can't walk away." Her chest tightened at his words. She had always known that he wouldn't let her go. He had always been possessive, always had the power to pull her back when she tried to break free. But this time, it felt different. This time, she wasn't sure if she was strong enough to fight him. "You don't own me," she said quietly, though her voice shook. "I'm not yours to control." He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You were never mine to control," he said, his voice softening. "But I need you. I need you by my side, and I won't let anything stand in the way of that." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for a moment. His words were like a balm, soothing the pain she had buried deep inside. But even as she felt the warmth of his hand against her skin, a part of her screamed to break free, to escape before it was too late. She pulled away, her heart racing. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't live like this. Not again." He stepped back, his eyes narrowing as if trying to decipher the truth behind her words. "You don't have a choice," he said quietly. "You've made your decision the moment you walked back into my life." She didn't answer, the truth of his words sinking in. She had made a choice, hadn't she? She had walked back into his world, back into the very place she had fought so hard to escape. She could feel the walls closing in again, the familiar sense of helplessness creeping back. He wasn't wrong. She had chosen this. She had chosen him. But that didn't mean she had to stay. "I'm not the same person I was before," she said, her voice shaking. "I can't go back to that life, to that world." His gaze softened for a moment, and he stepped closer again, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to go back," he said. "You don't have to be the person you were. But you're still the woman I love, and that's all that matters." His words struck her like a bolt of lightning. Could she really go back to him? Could she truly return to the man who had once been everything to her? As much as she wanted to say no, as much as she wanted to walk away, she knew in her heart that it was never that simple. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew one thing for certain. There was no escaping him. And as much as it terrified her, there was a part of her that didn't want to escape. The days blurred into each other, and as much as she tried to ignore the truth, it clung to her like a shadow. She was back in his world. There was no escaping it now. He had promised to protect her, to keep her safe, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized the cost of that safety was everything she had ever known. She had become a prisoner to the man she had once loved, and the worst part was, she didn't know if she wanted to leave. It was strange, that feeling of being torn between the life she had chosen and the life that had been thrust upon her. It had been easy to walk away from him before, to turn her back on everything he represented, but now, as she stood in his presence, again, everything felt so different. He had changed, but so had she. She wasn't the same woman who had left him all those years ago. She had learned to survive on her own, learned to build a life outside of the dangers that followed him. But now, standing in his mansion, surrounded by the life he had built, she wasn't sure if she could ever walk away again. "You're still thinking about leaving," he said one night, his voice as dark as the shadows surrounding them. He had appeared out of nowhere, as he always did, his presence commanding her attention, pulling her away from her own thoughts. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly, her voice steady but unsure. I'm just trying to figure out where I belong." "You belong with me," he said, his voice low, almost possessive. She felt the heat of his gaze on her, the weight of his words sinking in. "You've always belonged with me." She closed her eyes for a moment, the familiar ache of longing stirring in her chest. She had once belonged to him, completely and utterly. But that was before the world had torn them apart, before she had discovered the depths of the darkness he was capable of. She had walked away then, and part of her still wanted to walk away now. But another part of her was still drawn to him, to the power he held, to the man who had once made her feel like she was the only one that mattered. "You don't understand," she whispered, opening her eyes and meeting his gaze. "I can't be part of this world anymore. I can't be with you again." He took a step forward, closing the distance between them, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't get to choose that," he said softly, his voice thick with intensity. "You never did. We're already here, and there's no going back." She felt the truth of his words seep into her bones, like ice water running through her veins. There was no going back. She had already crossed the point of no return. She had already made the decision when she walked back into his life. "I've changed," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm not the same woman I was before." His eyes softened for a moment, and for the first time in days, she saw a flicker of the man she had once loved. The vulnerability in his eyes shocked her, and for a brief second, she wondered if he was capable of change, too. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the cold, calculating man she had come to fear. "I don't need you to be the woman you were," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I just need you to be with me. I need you to trust me again." She looked at him, her heart aching with a mixture of fear and longing. Could she trust him again? Could she let herself fall back into his arms, knowing the danger that came with it? Could she live with the fact that she had given up her freedom for him, for the protection he promised, for the love he demanded? She didn't know the answer. She didn't know if she was strong enough to trust him again, to trust herself. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let her walk away. Not now. Not ever. "I'm not sure if I can trust you," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I'm not sure if I can be the woman you want me to be." He stepped closer, his hand gently touching her cheek. "I don't want you to be anyone else," he said softly. "I want you to be with me, to choose me. That's all I'm asking." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for just a moment, letting herself feel the warmth of his hand on her skin. She had once believed in them, believed in the love they shared, but now, everything felt different. The man who had once been her everything now seemed like a stranger. And yet, the pull between them remained, undeniable, impossible to ignore. "I can't promise you that," she said, her voice shaking with the weight of her words. "I can't promise that I'll be the woman you remember." His face softened, and he leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was both desperate and tender. It was a kiss that spoke of everything they had lost and everything they still had to fight for. She wanted to pull away, to stop herself from falling back into the chaos of his world, but she couldn't. Not when everything inside her screamed for him. She had tried to fight it, to deny the love she still felt for him. But the truth was, she wasn't sure if she ever could. As they pulled away, she realized that she was trapped, not just by his world, but by her own heart. And there was no turning back now. It was a moment of undeniable truth, the culmination of everything they had gone through, everything that had once been between them. She stood there, in the quiet of the grand mansion, the weight of his presence pressing down on her. For so long, she had fought to escape him, to escape the power and control that had once threatened to consume her. But now, as she looked at him, she realized something she hadn't admitted to herself before. She wasn't ready to walk away. The love they had shared, the bond they once built, had never truly faded. It had only been buried beneath years of fear, anger, and silence. He was standing before her, waiting for an answer, but the words she wanted to speak were stuck in her throat. What could she say? What could she do? There was no simple answer. "I don't know if I can be who you want me to be," she whispered, her voice fragile. Her heart was pounding in her chest, the uncertainty choking her. "I don't know if I can go back to that life. But I can't keep running from you. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not." He took a step closer, his eyes filled with something that was both a promise and a threat. The man she had once loved was standing in front of her, but he was different now. He had changed. And so had she. "You don't have to run," he said, his voice steady but soft, as if he was trying to soothe her. "You don't have to be anyone other than who you are. You just have to choose. Choose to be with me. Choose to stay." Her breath caught in her throat as she tried to find the words. She had tried to fight this for so long, to build a life without him, to escape the darkness that came with being in his world. But deep down, she knew that she wasn't truly free. He still had a hold on her. He always would. "I don't want to be controlled," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I can't go back to living in the shadows. I can't go back to being trapped." His face hardened, and for a moment, she thought he would walk away. But instead, he reached out and cupped her face in his hands, pulling her closer. "You're not trapped," he said quietly. "You're with me because you want to be, and I will never let you go." She closed her eyes, feeling the heat of his hands against her skin. She wanted to pull away, but something inside her told her to stay, to listen, to face the truth. She could feel the weight of his words, the gravity of the promise he was making. But did she want that? Did she want to be with him again, after everything that had happened? She opened her eyes and looked at him, seeing the man she had once loved, the man who had once made her feel invincible. But now, there was something darker in him, something that scared her. "I can't trust you anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust myself." He didn't flinch, didn't back away. Instead, he held her gaze, his expression unwavering. "You don't need to trust yourself," he said, his voice low and controlled. "You only need to trust me. And I swear, I'll never let you down." The words echoed in her mind as she stood there, caught in the storm of emotions swirling inside her. How could she trust him? How could she trust anything after everything that had happened? And yet, there was a part of her that still believed in him, still believed in the man he had once been. She had fought so hard to build a life without him. But now, as she stood there, she realized that no matter what she did, she couldn't escape him. He was a part of her. And no matter how hard she tried to deny it, she always would be a part of his world. "I don't know if I can live this life again," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I can't live without you." His expression softened, and he reached out to pull her into his arms. "You don't have to live without me," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You'll never have to live without me again." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to surrender, to let go of the fear, the doubt, and the pain. She closed her eyes, feeling the safety of his embrace, the warmth of his body against hers. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could ever truly escape the life he had pulled her back into. But in that moment, she realized that she didn't have to, because she wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. In this captivating dark romance, a woman finds herself drawn back into the dangerous world of the Mafia boss she once tried to escape. As the intense emotions of love, betrayal, and desire resurface, she must navigate the complicated and often toxic relationship that binds her to him. The dark romance between them is undeniable, with both characters struggling to overcome their past and rebuild a future amidst the shadows of power, control, and danger. The story delves deep into the complexities of trust, manipulation, and redemption, as the two lovers try to reconcile their intense connection with the painful truths they've been avoiding. This dark romance explores themes of obsession, protection, and the haunting pull of a past that refuses to be left behind. As their tumultuous relationship unfolds, both characters must confront their deepest fears and make choices that will define their futures. Can love truly overcome the darkness that surrounds them, or will their toxic past tear them apart forever? Discover the twists and turns of this gripping dark romance that will leave you questioning whether love is worth the risk when it's tangled in lies and danger. The Mafia boss and the woman he once loved are forced to face the truth in this unforgettable dark romance, where every decision has a consequence, and no one is ever truly free from the past.